Welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Gaulin.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. This episode is really heartwarming for me because we're inviting our guest back, Karen, who you probably know if you've listened to our IBS-C playlist. Karen's interview with us a while ago, about a year ago, she shared her IBS-C journey with us, and it really resonated with you out there. And it's one of our most listened and watched episodes, and the questions that you had, we just had to invite her back again. So welcome, Karen. So glad to have you back on the show.
It's great to be back, and I'm so excited that the different questions that you've been asking have been listened to well, and hopefully they'll continue to get lots of good interaction from your listeners. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and it's all about, we all as patients want to see someone like us that we can relate to. And I really believe that your story and your journey was so authentic and genuine, and people really related to it so much that they were almost upset that they didn't have more information to know how you were able to live and thrive despite a really potential debilitating condition like irritable bowel syndrome with constipation. So we have a full episode about Karen's basic journey. We're just going to jump into just a little bit to recap in case you didn't listen to it, so that the context of our conversation will make sense. So Karen, just share a little bit about, your patient journey, just summarize, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Sure, absolutely. So I will say I was a very healthy person. I had a really good, healthy diet. And I had an episode back in 2009 where it was several episodes of antibiotics, viral infection, and I ended up with a lot of different symptoms. One of them, that's where the journey started with IBS-C. And for about 8 or 9 years, I went to lots of different doctors and got no help, or not no help until the very end, toward that 8 or 9 year period. And in working with a particular doctor, I was able to resolve a lot of my issues. But in that 8-year period, my life was miserable. It was, I'll just spare you the details, but it was awful. And I really, I didn't necessarily enjoy being around people, events, parties, because it was always food related. But anyway, did then get proper care, proper diagnosis, and have been on a real positive trend. And I will say I'm not 100% symptom free, but I'm in the 90s. So it spikes when I travel for sure, but it does with my husband too. So that's a normal thing. So
yeah, and there's been studies that even show, and I love this one. It was he made a hypothesis, Dr. Spiegel, about gravity and its impact on the body. And IBS symptoms. And, I was like, oh my God, I totally relate to this. It's not proven with lots of evidence. He hypothesized about it, and I think he's still doing research, but it's an interesting connection. So maybe when you're in flight,
wow,
your body changes, or the pressure, whatever, the gravity affects the gut and IBS symptoms. So it's very interesting. And I think we did a podcast episode on that, so you can check it out. But I want to put this into context because it's so important that your story, while it resonated so well, and it, some people said they were in tears because they felt like they related to you. You can go in the comments. It's amazing. And it's also very sad because people are really struggling. But I want to just preface this conversation with the fact that we can all have the same diagnosis, IBS-C, but the underlying triggers and causes, and subsequently the treatments, will not always be the same. So not one size fits all. So we've had questions like, what did she take? What did she do? And I want to avoid that because I don't think that's going to be productive, and we don't want to send patients down the wrong rabbit hole. However, what I do want to focus on is the way you communicated with your doctor, the things that you had to be candid about in order to work with him or her to get the right diagnosis, and subsequently how you managed to go through the treatment phases and what you tried and didn't try. I think that's what's most important, because patients were feeling lost and were confused. I got it Instagram messages, DMs from a young woman who is really struggling, and she wanted to know the doctor that you went to. And I did share that because she's in the same area.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
but it's very upsetting to see these stories, and we always want to help, but we don't want to send anyone down the wrong hole with like, you have to try this. We want to give guidance and information so that patients can have a more productive conversation and get to the right provider. And also, if you're not with the right provider, Karen, you've been through it. That's the stuff we want to talk about, right? I think that's most helpful.
Absolutely. And it was definitely a journey through multiple providers. And what I will say is there are traditional GI doctors that can help basic symptoms, but if you reach a wall, don't stop there. And I reached a point where I was so fed up, I never wanted to see another doctor again in my life, but it was that one last time that I went, and it happened to be probably the doctor that pointed me in the right direction, because he said, Karen, I can't help you, but I know someone that can. So there's connections in the GI world where they have their specialties, and I was able to get directed really to, I'll just go out there and say he's no longer there, but UNC Chapel Hill has a lot of research and a lot of doctors come out of that program. The particular doctor I saw locally had done a fellowship at Chapel Hill and was able to then point me to a doctor that had done years of research. And what I will say is, while there is the diagnosis IBS and it's C or D, he then takes IBS and breaks it down into 40 different subdiagnoses. And that's where I landed in one of those. It was a C, but it was also a subdiagnosis of that. So my situation might not be the same as others, but don't ever stop pursuing and finding the right doctor.
So let's talk about finding the right doctor. You may have your primary care. That's not, maybe they refer you to a gastroenterologist, but not all gastroenterologists and their specialty areas are the same, or their approaches. So when you were looking for the doctors, when you ended up going through, several of them, when your doctor said, I can't help you, but I know someone who can, what was the differentiator? What skills or areas of focus did this doctor have? Was it motility? Was it, what was his focus that made him suggest that doctor to you? Because I want to help patients, guide them in that direction.
So, and this might be a new phrase to some people. I didn't know it at the time, and it was not a phrase in 2009 when I was first having struggles, but it's DGBI, disorders of gut-brain interaction. And essentially the communication pathway between the brain and the gut was messed up. And so it doesn't mean I was, from a psychological standpoint, messed up at all. And sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, well, that's not me. It is simply a medical term, DGBI. And so this doctor, that was his area of specialty, or one of
and actually back in 2009, the research wasn't even as far along as it is now. Now they've even changed the definition from functional to disorders of the gut-brain interaction, which is what you're saying.
Correct.
It makes a lot of sense because conditions like IBS are so multifactorial. It could be behavioral, psychological, social, dietary, all these factors coming in together. And you want a doctor that understands and that believes in that full picture. And I think more and more than when you were diagnosed in 2009, all the approaches that we're seeing are very multidisciplinary, which is so good at this stage.
Different. In fact, the phrase that was used is biopsychosocial, meaning there were biological things that were impacted when my gut flora was disrupted with multi uses of antibiotic. Like, is that possible? Probably was a factor. Were there stress factors? Did I have a really bad bout with bronchitis? Like all of these things, it was a perfect storm for me that were disrupting my gut motility, all of that. But yes, doctors are becoming more aware of the need to look holistically at a patient versus, oh, just take dairy out of your diet, or, oh, let's just do an upper endoscopy. Those are so narrow in scope, and they're not looking at the whole patient.
Can we talk generally about the stuff that you tried? And again, I want to caution patients. What worked for Karen may not work for me or anyone else. But I think I want to highlight your journey and the different medications, because what patients we should know is that you have options, and the more information that you have, there's not just one size fits all drug or an over-the-counter remedy, but to be aware of the options, to be able to talk to your doctor about them. So what was your treatment? What was the cycle? What was the journey? Like, did they put you on laxatives? Did they put you on, and back then in 2009, they didn't have all the drugs that they have now. So,
So
what did that look like?
I will skip over the first 8 years of where whatever was tried didn't work. And that was really anything under the sun. And I was willing to try anything. So I was so desperate.
Right.
But when I transitioned to a care provider that was knowledgeable in this space, there was a medication path. So one of them was one of the more, I don't know, I call it like an industrial strength laxative. So it was to essentially do its job on a daily basis. But then I was also on neuromodulators, which are essentially antidepressants. And it wasn't because I was depressed, but it was to regulate the gut-brain interaction. So it was a combination of some medications. And I reached a point where I'm like, I'm just going to trust this doctor and I'm going to do whatever he says. And I don't really like to be on pharmaceuticals at all, but I'm going to trust that this doctor knows what he's talking about. So that was like, think of it as like putting a cast on your arm. Like, my arm is broken. That was the recommended cast. So that was the medication pathway. There were regular phone calls with this doctor. I didn't have to pay to go for a visit every single time, but it was regular communication by email or by call to check in, tweak medications if I needed to. The other aspect to the treatment, and I think I mentioned this on the previous call, was CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. I have done counseling in the past. I had never heard of CBT, and I show up at the office of the provider and I say, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I'm having GI issues. I have no idea why I'm here. And she's like, I know why you're here. So learning that was a very helpful part of my strategy, probably equally helpful for me, because I, as a result, made some changes, and the stress that I was putting on myself, I came to understand I was my own worst enemy. So that process helped me. So it was a combination pharmaceuticals and also CBT. There was no diet restrictions, no supplements that I had to be on. It was pretty streamlined and simple.
So I go back to the, if you will, the cognitive behavioral therapy. Now we have so many digital therapeutics apps like Nerva and others that help with that gut-directed hypnotherapy, which is so important, and it's all evidence-based. I don't know if you had that when you were going through yours, but it's the same kind of behavioral. What are some of the behavioral changes that you made, if you're comfortable sharing that?
I will say the number one thing that CBT addresses is, and when you say evidence-based, it's really interesting that you use that term. There are often things that we circulate in our brains that are really not true. And we tend to then emotionally react to things that are not true. And so what CBT will drive you toward is to find the evidence. Where is the evidence for whatever it is that you are? And for me, I don't think I'm a hugely anxious person, but it might create anxiety if I'm thinking something that was really not evidence-based and true. So that was one of the strategies with CBT, was really differentiating between that which is a lie and that which is true, and how your body responds. The other thing, another technique that this therapist used was EMDR. I'm not an expert in it, and I don't know that I could even speak well about it.
Is that with the eye?
Yes.
They do something with your eye. Yeah, that's very
interesting. It has
interesting.
to do with your eye movement, but it's essentially The way she explained it is that, imagine you have a bunch of papers all over the top of your desk and the wind comes and the papers fly everywhere. What EMDR attempts to do is neatly file those papers where they belong. And so it's not really going to create triggers in your response mechanism. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think the point here that you're making is very strong. That, and to go back a little bit, the neuromodulators.
Yes.
And there's lots of evidence that show that a very low dose of, like, the thing is the first line antidepressant works on the gut is the second brain. It has the second number of neurons that after the brain. So this is why we have that. I'm one of those nervous Nelly flyers. If I'm even knowing that I have to go on a plane, I can feel that stuff, everything moving, and I'm nervous, and no matter how much I try to calm myself. And then I did do cognitive behavioral therapy for the flying at one point, and it is about evidence. It's like, is the plane really going to crash, Jackie?
Right.
Like, this moving turbulence is not, it's like riding in a boat. It's the waves, and it's not just going to go down. So once I logically figured that out, I could better manage those feelings and subsequently my GI issues.
And that's where the change comes in, because you're no longer a prisoner to those feelings and you're able to get past it. And that's, to me, based on evidence, change. And so it's a new way of thinking, and it then translates into your GI, and it's much more calming.
Yeah. And I think, our patients who write in, and it's like they try every medication, every laxative. And laxative, we've done numerous over-the-counter laxative, numerous podcasts on this with experts, and that can have a worsening effect, and your body will never be able to naturally conduct the bowel functions.
Right.
What is your advice? Like, you've had some good results. And are you still on the same treatment path? Are you still taking those things and doing cognitive behavioral therapies, or how are you managing now? Are you fine?
I'm fine, honestly. So let's say my treatment, it was probably the better part of 3 years. It took a little bit of time for me to get into the spot where I was, and it took a little time, therefore, for me to get to a place of where I felt like I could say, well, I was well, and I wasn't having like a majority of bad days. So I don't take any pharmaceuticals. So no medications. I don't go for therapy or CBT, but if there's an issue in my life and I want to go talk to a counselor or a good friend, that type of thing. I do take a couple of supplements. So a natural, and this was my family doctor who said, just take magnesium on a daily basis for your neurological well-being. I eat a lot of fruit. There's the GI doctor I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and the GI doctor that I saw here that had done his fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill, and I could give a plug for him because he's all over Instagram. But
go ahead.
Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, he goes by Dr. B, if you've heard of him. He has several books out there, but he really highly recommends. He's more plant-based, but he will tell you eat kiwi fruit. That is a very good fruit with a lot of good fiber.
Well, also there's evidence on that.
Yes.
2 kiwi fruits a day can help with constipation. Yeah. And there is a paper on that, a couple papers on that. And I will share it with you listeners because there's evidence. Yes. We're all about the evidence. And it's really good for you. And the magnesium, I've also heard, and there is evidence, but you don't want to just start magnesium on your own because too much can have a not a good effect. So you definitely want to ask your provider about magnesium.
And there's different types of magnesium.
Yes.
So this was a very recommended specific, and it's low dosage. And and
you don't want to just start chugging a lug in this stuff because
2 kiwis, you can eat 2 kiwis a day.
2 kiwis a day, and it shouldn't bother you. But again, everyone's different. But you definitely want to ask your doctor about those things. And I think that the other thing is you said you went through and for me too, like you understand the CBT and the behavioral, and you question yourself and challenge yourself with those negative thoughts. And you have that. That's innate now because you've had that training.
Correct.
And I feel the same. It's like, okay, Jackie, is that really logical?
Correct.
And you kind of walk yourself, which is so powerful. I know we talked about this before, and I think this is really important, is the relationship between your pelvic floor and maybe some of the symptoms of IBS-C. Were you able to go through and have your pelvic floor checked? And how was that helping in your treatment plan?
I did. That happened later. Like I did my initial treatment, and then it was in conversation with my family doctor. And she said that it would be a good idea. So I went, had the evaluation, and sure enough, there was some imbalance in the pelvic floor. Never realized there are 40 muscles that make up the pelvic floor. The exercises that I had to do looked like I was doing nothing, but I would sweat. It was so exhausting. But my point is, it definitely is going to impact your gut. It's not, again, for everybody, but it's a simple get it checked out. There are limited number of physical therapists that specialize in that field. So you would need somebody that's definitely certified in pelvic floor dysfunction. But
yeah, that's an important point. We actually did a few episodes about the pelvic floor, and Dr. Darren Brenner also mentioned, when people, a lot of women are on, just ongoing laxative, and nothing is helping, that it could not, or medications, if the medications and all of that aren't helping, that it could be a pelvic floor issue, and they guide them to a pelvic floor therapist, and it makes a huge difference.
Yes, definitely. So never stop trying. And there is help. There are some really good doctors out there.
Before we let you go, I know you're a busy lady, but I do want to focus on, what we see over and over again is patient dissatisfaction with their current provider, or they are so frustrated they give up and they're still struggling. And it just breaks my heart when I read these comments. So I want to ask your advice for all of us. What are your tips if someone is facing that situation right now, that they're frustrated, they're disappointed, they don't believe that there's any hope for them, the doctors are disappointed? Like, what is your advice for them?
All right, you're asking me, and I'm going to be really, really direct and say, don't lose hope, and pray that God's going to provide the right doctor for you, because I was in a place of hopelessness. I really was. And I didn't want to go to a doctor ever again in my life. It's just believe that you will be led to where you need to be. Don't give up. For me, it was a mailer that came, and it was a workshop that was being done by Dr. Bolsowitz that I referenced. And I went to his workshop, and that action changed my life. So it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I can't say do 1, 2, 3. What I can say is pray and believe and don't lose hope, because your body is not meant to behave the way it is in a lot of the ways that we've all experienced. And there are doctors out there that do understand and that can help. So don't lose hope. Keep asking, don't get in that frenzy. This is a true story, Jackie, that when I was at Mayo Clinic for a 1 week stint with, every single test that was done under the sun. And this was back in 2009, 2010, when there was a lot of the research that wasn't available back then. But they diagnosed me with health anxiety.
Oh, God.
Basically, they said, you're doing too much research on the internet and it's causing you to have more anxiety. And I'm like, because nobody can help me.
Oh, God.
So that was a really odd diagnosis. But I think the message that I want to say is recognize that is a real thing, that we don't want to try to take so much into our own hands, that we are being our own doctors and doing so much research on the web. There's a time and place to just trust, believe, wait. And gosh, I've had people find my phone number so randomly, and I'll have very frank conversations with them. And there's a woman here that lives like 5 miles away from me, and she's like, I saw this and I Googled, and so find my phone number. I don't care.
Oh, God. 1-800-Karen.
1-800-Karen. Yeah.
No, but seriously, you're right. And there are resources, and I'm going to continue to say credible, trustworthy. The
Yes.
American College of Gastroenterology has a physician locator.
Yes.
The gastrogirl.com, we have plenty of resources to start you off with. And our podcast,
The Rome
Foundation has excellent resources. And you could probably find physicians that have been trained with the methodology of they have great patient provider communication, because it really is a team. It's a shared decision-making team, which brings me to my next question.
Yes.
For those patients who have been on a medication and they're not having any luck with it and they're frustrated, maybe they stopped it. A lot of us are afraid to, challenge our doctor a little bit or know how to ask for other options. What is your advice or tips for that? There are some new medications on the market that work differently in the colon to help with constipation. But how does a patient know if that's right, and how do they ask their doctor? Is your advice for that?
I would say you are your own advocate, and the doctor has no idea how you feel unless you say something. So say something, speak up. I don't know how many different tweaks I made of changing. It was probably like 5 or 6, because I was frustrated. I'm like, I'm trying this, it's not working. Okay, let's try something different. I'm trying this, it's not working. Just speak up. And you're absolutely right. There are so many newer medications that are on the market. There are some that might not be covered by insurance, but I guarantee you, if you go direct to the actual pharmaceutical company, they have some sort of patient advocacy that will provide the medication. Don't be afraid to try something for 3 months or whatever I'm using that as whatever.
No, but that's a
doctor
good point.
recommends. Because I tried so many different ones until it was like, okay, we've reached a sweet spot. Okay, this combination is actually helpful, and speak up and know that if your insurance doesn't cover it, there's ways around that too.
Yeah, that's a
RX or
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies have special programs for patients that don't have insurance or can't afford through the typical channels. It's important to know about these because you have options.
Yes.
But you don't know unless you ask. And we don't want you to give up. And you can always reach out to us at Gastro Girl too. I've gotten emails and DMs, and we can't give medical advice, but we can point you in the right direction as best we can so that you don't feel alone, because you're not alone. Karen, I really appreciate your coming on again. You've been so just generous with your heart and your story, and this really benefits folks. And if you have more questions, leave them in the comment section, and maybe Karen will pop in there and answer a few, or we'll have her on again if she's willing. But we want to make this a community of exchange and empowerment. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Give us a review. We're not really good about that, saying to do this. We're not really good at self-promoting, but we need to be better. But please share this with those who may be helped by it. And thank you again to Ardelyx, who were able to support this episode. And Karen, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And I look forward to continuing these conversations whenever in the future.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.